The night Serafina Voss stood in the great hall of Ironvale Keep, she was not thinking about what she might lose. She was thinking about what she had already found. A man who had looked at her like she was the answer to a question he had been asking his whole life. She was 22 years old, dressed in white, and completely certain that the next few minutes would change everything. She was right. She just did not know it would change everything in the wrong direction. The hall was full. 3,000 wolves sat in rows of carved wooden chairs, wearing their finest clothes. Candles burned on every wall. The air smelled of pine and cold mountain wind. Serafina stood at the front, near the altar, and waited for Alpha King Cade Ironvale to walk to her side and seal their bond in front of his entire kingdom. He walked to the front of the room. He stopped a few feet away from her. His jaw was tight. His eyes were distant, like he was looking at something past her, something she could not see. For one strange second, she thought he was nervous. She almost smiled. Then he spoke. His voice was calm and flat, like a man reading from a document, not a man standing across from his mate. He said the bond had been a mistake, that he had given it more thought, that an Alpha King needed a partner of stronger bloodline, someone whose family name could bring alliances, not questions. He said Serafina Voss was free to go. Free to go. As if she had only been visiting. The hall went completely silent for 4 full seconds. Then it broke apart. Whispers, the shuffle of chairs, people leaning toward each other with wide eyes. Serafina heard none of it clearly. Everything seemed to come from very far away. She looked at Cade, searching his face for the man she had known for 3 years, the one who had found her at a border meeting when she was 19, and spent weeks working up the courage to speak to her properly. She looked for him, and found nothing familiar. She did not cry, she did not argue. She turned around, walked the full length of that hall alone, pushed open the heavy doors herself, and stepped outside into the cold night air. No one followed her. 48 hours later, on the formal order of Queen Regent Isolde, Cade's aunt and the real power behind his council, Serafina was removed from Ironvale territory entirely. She was told she could not return within 200 miles of the kingdom. Her father, a Gamma in a smaller pack, had no power to challenge an Alpha King's decree. Her younger sister Lena watched from a high window as Serafina's car drove down the mountain road and disappeared into the dark trees below. The first year was the hardest thing she ever survived. She ended up in a small border town called Ashfen, working shifts at a roadside inn and taking whatever security work she could find. The town sat at the edge of unclaimed territory, full of wolves who had left their packs for one reason or another. Nobody asked questions in Ashfen, which was exactly what she needed. The loss of the mate bond felt like a constant low ache, the way a broken bone hurts even after it starts to heal. It was not love exactly, or not only love. It was the loss of something that was supposed to be permanent, a recognition that ran deeper than feelings. She had been certain of him, the way she was certain the sun would rise. Losing that certainty left a gap in her that she did not know how to fill. She got through 2 bad months and came out the other side quieter and more careful than she had been before. She stopped writing letters she would never send. She started paying closer attention to everything around her, how the border settlements governed themselves, which rogue pack leaders were respected, and which ones were feared, what the difference between the two actually looked like in practice. It was during one of her evening security shifts, outside the inn on a cold Thursday night, that she met Councillor Marin. Marin was 72 years old, small and sharp-eyed, with white hair she kept pulled back tight, and the posture of someone who had never once in her life been intimidated by a room. She had been the only female alpha in the Northern Territories before a political coup removed her from power 20 years ago. She had spent the time since studying, traveling, and watching. She had been watching Serafina for 3 weeks before she said a single word to her. "You move like someone trained to protect a king," Marin said one evening, stepping out of the inn's doorway. "I think it is time you trained to become one instead." Serafina stared at her. "I am not interested in protecting anyone anymore." "Good," Marin said. "That is not what I said." What followed was 4 years of the most demanding work Serafina had ever done. Marin taught her pack law from the beginning, not the simple version that most wolves learned in childhood, but the deep structure of it, the treaties and precedents, the places where the rules could be used, and the places where they could be challenged. She taught her how to read an agreement before signing it, and how to spot the line where a fair deal quietly became an unfair one. She studied territorial rights and diplomatic code. She sat through long evenings learning how different pacts negotiated, what they valued, what they feared, where their pride lived, and where their patience ended. She learned to listen more than she spoke, which was harder than it sounded. In parallel, she trained physically under a man named Dax, a former royal enforcer who had left Cade's service after the council made a decision he could not forgive. Dax was not warm or encouraging. He simply showed up every morning and pushed her until she was better than she had been the day before. She respected him for that. Slowly, quietly, she began traveling to the unclaimed territories, the 11 rogue pack settlements that existed outside any kingdom's control. She helped settle a water rights argument between two neighboring packs that had been close to open conflict for a year. She helped 3 small settlements write a shared trade agreement that gave all of them better terms than they had managed alone. She did not announce these things. She just did them. Word travels fast among wolves who have no kingdom to belong to. They pay close attention to who can be trusted, because they have learned the hard way what happens when they get it wrong. One by one, the settlement leaders began to seek her out. She listened to their problems carefully, and helped when she could, and was honest when she could not. Her sister Lena, still living inside Ironvale territory, sent quiet messages through trusted hands. Serafina learned that Cade had never bonded with anyone else, that his council was struggling with 3 border packs that had withdrawn their loyalty after a badly managed dispute, that Queen Regent Isolde's influence was fading under the weight of a financial scandal that had been 3 years in the building, that Cade himself had become harder to read, quieter, prone to long silences that his betas did not know what to do with. Serafina read these messages carefully and then set them aside. She did not feel triumphant. She felt something quieter, a faint sadness for what had been wasted, and then a steady resolve to keep moving forward. She had somewhere to be. In the 5th year, the 11 settlements of the unclaimed territories voted for the first time on whether to form a unified governing body and elect a single queen to represent them. The vote took 3 days. Serafina won by 14 votes out of 16 eligible councils. The ceremony was nothing like what had been planned for her at Ironvale Keep. There was no great hall, no candles, no rows of witnesses in fine clothing. She sat in an open field on a stone chair that someone had carried out from a storage shed, and 11 alpha representatives stood before her and lowered their heads. Dax stood behind her. Marin sat in the front row with her arms folded and the expression of someone watching something they had expected to happen for a very long time. She was 27 years old, and she had built every single piece of this herself. She did not return to Ironvale territory in secret, or without warning. That was not her style anymore. She sent a formal letter on official Queen of the Unclaimed Territories correspondence, requesting a border summit to renegotiate the resource-sharing agreements that had been quietly breaking down for 2 years. The letter was polite, specific, and entirely professional. She signed her full title at the bottom. She did not mention anything about their history. Cade read the letter 3 times. His council wanted to refuse. Isolde, who still attended meetings as an informal advisor, called it a political trap. But 2 of Cade's most important allied alphas had already sent private messages saying they intended to attend the summit regardless. Her name had traveled ahead of her, and they were not willing to ignore a queen who controlled 11 territories and 3 major supply routes through the north. Cade agreed to the summit. She arrived with Dax and 2 advisors. She wore deep green, not royal colors, not a challenge, just her own choice. She sat at the head of the table because the summit was on neutral ground, and the neutral host had offered her the chair as the visiting head of state. Cade sat directly across from her. Their eyes met the moment she sat down. 5 years of everything that had happened between them passed through that look in about 3 seconds. She opened the summit. Every person in that room watched what happened over the next 4 hours, and most of them would talk about it for years afterward. She knew every agreement on the table, and had found the weak points in each one before the meeting started. She was firm without being aggressive. She offered Cade's kingdom a trade partnership that was genuinely good for both sides, and everyone in the room understood that she did not need to offer it. She had enough leverage to close the northern supply routes and let the pressure build quietly for 2 more winters. She had chosen not to. She walked in with peace, Alpha Brennan said afterward, but the room understood. It was the peace of someone who had already won. At the end of the summit, Alpha Brennan stood and lowered his head to her. Then the delegate beside him did the same. Then the next one. One by one, the Alphas present paid their respects. Not to Cade, not to his title, but to her. Cade sat very still and watched every single moment of it. Isolde found her in the corridor afterward. She began with a comment about the summit being surprisingly productive and moved toward something that was almost an apology when she realized it was not having any effect. Serafina listened patiently until there was a pause, and then she said, "I do not need anything from you. I have not for 4 years." She walked away without waiting for a response. Cade was waiting in the courtyard when she came outside to leave. He stood near the stone wall with his hands at his sides, looking like a man who had rehearsed something and then forgotten every word of it. She stopped a few feet away and waited. He said, "I was wrong, about everything. I understood that 6 months after it happened, and I could not undo it. I am not telling you this because I expect anything. I just need you to know that I know." She was quiet for a moment. The mountain wind moved through the courtyard. Somewhere above them, a door opened and closed. She said, "I know you were wrong. I knew it the night you did it. So did you." She said it without cruelty. It landed the way the truth always does, when it has been sitting in a room too long, solid and final, and too honest to argue with. She told him the trade agreement would hold, that she intended to work with his kingdom because it was the right thing for her people, that she did not need him to feel guilty, and she was not interested in carrying his regret for him. She had a nation to lead. She got into her car. She did not look back as it pulled away. 3 months later, the trade agreement was working well. The supply routes through the north were open, and Ironvale's eastern borders had stabilized, partly because the buffer created by Serafina's territories took pressure off Cade's weakest lines. She had not done this as a gift. She had done it because it was strategically sound, and because her people benefited from a stable neighbor. Lena visited the Queen's court in the late autumn. She stayed for a week, helping in the administrative offices, and catching her sister up on small news from back home. She mentioned, near the end of her visit, that Cade had quietly removed Isolde from his council a few weeks after the summit, that he had been working longer hours, that she had heard, from someone who worked near his private rooms, that he kept Serafina's official correspondence letter in his desk drawer. Serafina listened. She poured more tea. She asked how Lena's new partner was settling into their home. She was not cold, she was not closed. She simply had a very clear sense of where her energy belonged now, and it was not in the past. The bond between them was never restored. That was not the point of the story. The point was simpler, and in many ways, more powerful than any reunion could have been. She had been sent away with nothing, and had built something that 11 Packs trusted, and every Alpha in the region had to respect. She had done it without bitterness, without rushing, without ever once letting the wound become the center of her life. She had walked out of that hall alone, at 22, with nothing but herself. At 27, every room she walked into rearranged itself around her. She had not come back to reclaim what was taken. She had come back to show what she had built instead, and that turned out to be far greater than anything she had lost.